Hello, my fellow geeks. This is the Indian AvGeek, episode number 69, and my name is Vishal Mehra. Today's guest lives at the intersection of the seat you're sitting in, the screen in front of you, and the Wi-Fi that may or may not work at 35,000 feet. Seth Miller is the founder and editor-in-chief of PaxEx.Aero, the go-to publication for anyone serious about in-flight product, cabin design, and passenger experience. He also hosts one of my favorite aviation podcasts, Dots, Lines, and Destinations, and has spent years holding airlines accountable to the experience they actually deliver. Seth, really glad to have you on. Welcome to the Indian AvGeek.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It is incredible to have you, especially as a long-time listener of DLD. Thank you for being here. Tell me, how did you and aviation happen, Seth, and the deep dive into passenger experience as a niche? How did this all begin?
I think it's my grandmother's fault. I think. And basically, when I was a very young kid, my grandmother lived near Tampa, Florida, and she lived under the approach path to the airport there, which, someone has to live near an airport, fine. But she had an aviation band radio, and I thought I could tune in, right? And so I started listening to the pilots talking with air traffic control, and I obviously had no idea what was going on. I was probably 5 or 6 years old, and I was bad enough at it that I kept changing the station, trying to find more, because I didn't understand that they didn't, talk the whole time. But that was part of it. That got me into being excited about airplanes a little bit. And then on top of that, my father traveled for work a lot. As I grew up, it's probably when I was from 8 to 12 or so, he started traveling a lot and came home with cool presents for me and my brother and sister, but also great stories. And I'm sure he sugarcoated some of it because I don't remember all of his stories about the challenges of travel, just the joys of it. But those two things together, I think, really set me up for being in love with aviation, mostly as a consumer of it. And then fast forward, get out of college, I was traveling for work a lot as well. I was an IT consultant. I still am traveling that way and flying around a lot. I got into frequent flyer points, started writing about that a bit. And this was the early 2000s, and internet started coming onto airplanes. And I'm an IT guy, so I'm like, I know the internet. And I'm an airplanes guy, and I'm traveling, so I know airplanes. Turns out I didn't know either of them. But I knew them enough that I thought it was interesting, and I started writing about them, and I started learning more. And fast forward, I hate to say it, more than 20 years now, or probably 25 years. And I didn't start writing until 2008, but I was certainly into it almost 20 years ago. And I've managed to create a life where I get to do this sort of for a living.
And in the process, have so many fans of
Yeah.
the work like me. I want to talk to you a bit about the recently concluded AIX. Of course, you were there. If you could give it one headline, set, whether it is connectivity or sustainability or seating, accessibility, whatever else, what would it be? How would you describe the show?
I think the show every year is a sort of homage to innovation. It's always about innovation and what can we change with any given platform. I am personally more interested in the in-flight entertainment and connectivity scene, so I spend my time in those holes. If you're into seats, you could never see an entertainment screen. Well, you'd see them in the seat demo, right? But you never see those vendors necessarily. So my view of that is biased by what I'm more interested in and what I write more about. But I would say for the connectivity world, the innovation was very much about the antennas that go on the planes. We're in I don't want to say a lull, but sort of a gap between new satellite constellations launching. And so right now it's all about getting the antennas working to support those new constellations as they come online. In the seating world, we continue to split the market in two very distinct ways. There is significant investment in sustainability and I'll say compact nature, reducing weight, reducing excess in the economy class seats, and then also building the sort of incredible comfort in the premium cabins. And I know we've got a couple more questions about that later on, but it really is a split market there. But the innovation just never stops, and that's one of the things I love about this industry is every year, every 6 months, go to one of these shows and you see yet another iteration of what's cool and how these very smart people are making neat innovations.
What was the most overhyped thing on the show floor? And conversely, what was underhyped but important?
Yeah, I'll answer the second part of that first. The underhyped, I think, is really about some of the things we saw of taking existing platforms and extending their lives or making them uh, more compelling for airlines. One example, Panasonic Avionics, they're one of the largest IFE companies in the world. Um, they have their X series, E capital X and then a number. They have 1.4 million screens have been delivered as part of the X1 or X3 series over the past however long, 15, 20 years. And a lot of those seats are still screens, excuse me, are still installed. Um, Okay. Well, imagine you had an Android tablet from 15 years ago. I don't even know if Android actually existed yet. But you've got this screen that is, quite frankly, ancient, has minimal RAM, minimal processor, the resolution is just okay. You now want to take this and make it modern, but to put a different screen in that same little box on a seat, you generally have to recertify the seat unless everything is perfect. And what they've done is taken the screen out, and as I wrote it up, separated the beauty from the brains. So the screen part, can stay the same, but the brains behind it, the memory, the processor, all of those things, the networking, all gets a massive upgrade. So it's basically on par with their brand new Astrova screens, but the physical piece weighs the same and has the same shape. And that way they don't have to do a full crash test series with it because right now in the industry, that is a debacle. Getting seats tested and approved, everybody is suffering for that. And as a result, by not having to do the full test suite, but still getting the new hardware, all of a sudden, this things we talk about personalization on screens, and you get, the map is actually an interactive experience now, not just a cycle of six different graphics showing where you are. Um, Making all of that stuff interactive and effective takes real processing power. They put a new GPU in it, so all the graphics render better. So it really is a massive change and is probably the least sexy thing you'll see because as a consumer, it looks exactly the same in the seat. You won't see a difference at all until you start to use it. And it's hard to notice that you're not angry. Right? You know when you get mad because something isn't working right, but you don't notice that, oh, that actually was good. Like you don't notice that you don't get angry. And this is one of those things that's designed to make you not angry at the screen in front of you.
So, what you're saying is the guts of the system get a great upgrade,
Yeah.
but the screen, it'll still be low res or
Um,
medium res.
It's medium res. I don't believe they're going to a 4K screen with those, because that changes too much of the testing situation. But you know, it also turns out that most content on planes isn't 4K anyways. It's an 11-inch screen. You're going to be okay. Most of this is in economy class, so it's even today they're dealing with not having all the content available to support the high res screens. So, but the all of the other stuff working better, making it a connected entertainment platform is a huge win. And, like I said, it's a little underhyped because it's hard to get too excited about, oh gosh, you put more RAM in the same screen, but it really does make a huge difference. Um,
Yeah.
Overhyped? I would say there's plenty of technology that we talk about that should be available in 2 to 3 years. And the running joke, and some of it will be, and some of it won't be. But the running joke in the industry is you need people thinking out into the future. You need to be developing things longer term. But a lot of the 2 to 3 years away stuff doesn't happen, and it's hard to get too excited about it. It's a rendering, it's not a real piece. Um, and so there are a few of those on the floor. I don't think there's any one that I would call out as being completely terrible. But we'll see. Give it another year or two, and then maybe they'll become the next underhyped thing because it's actually real.
Seth, I want to ask you about the Indian market and more specifically about Air India to start off with. Air India's transformation is now visible. You can say that. You have retrofitted 787-8s, you have Dash 9, the new Dash 9s. Now there's talk, of course, about the Hughes Networks IFC deal covering its A350-1000 and wide body fleet with home broadband level connectivity. Based on what you saw at AIX and what you know of the product, how does Air India stack up against the global competition, and does it have what it takes to be a credible premium product within this decade?
Maybe. And that's a terrible answer, but I'll say why. The new product looks good, right? I can't argue that. They're making some really smart choices, picking good solutions, good providers, reliable providers that can actually deliver the hardware that's promised. We're seeing it with the 787-8s, right? They are actually finally getting these retrofits that they so desperately needed. And I have experience with that. I flew on one of the 8s probably 3 or 4 years after it was delivered, and it was not in good shape. They went downhill very quickly. And so one of the challenges they face as an airline and is not getting good stuff on board, but keeping good stuff on board. And so that is a challenge for the crew, for maintenance, for operations, and also the customers, unfortunately. If passengers abuse the system, abuse the kit, there's only so much work that you can do to keep it up. And I think that's a part of what happened the last cycle around. So I do like where they're going with a lot of this stuff. We talk about like the entertainment system and the internet system on these retrofit planes is top notch. It's going to be good. Now we'll see where they go in terms of investing in content. That is also always a challenge, right? You can have the best screen in the world if you only have 4 movies, not so great. Historically, a lot of airlines have not invested there. There have been airlines, you get the Middle Eastern carriers with 1,000, 2,000 movies, whatever. Almost too much, arguably, because you spend the whole flight deciding what you want to watch because there's too many to pick from. But, having that content gets expensive, and there is some shift going on in terms of the licensing costs. We're seeing real good efforts by airlines, especially outside the United States, to load content that is not just Hollywood, which is the most expensive content on the market, right? If I can load one Hollywood movie, or I can load, 10 Bollywood movies, or 10 Chinese movies, or whatever the other is to support the large international base, you get better bang for your buck and more options, and people are interested in that. So we're seeing some specialty content coming along. Again, I don't know what Air India is going to do on that front. They had started to do better there a year or so ago as this renewal began, but it's coming. Internet service, the Hughes system is completely fine. It's not going to be broadband to start, I would say. The other challenge, and we get caught up a lot on this when we talk about sort of the internet systems on airplanes, there's what the system can support, and there's what the airline pays for. And so you can have a system that absolutely supports everybody can stream HD movies all day long. We can get that much bandwidth to the plane, but that's expensive. And typically the airlines will contract for less bandwidth than the system can support. And so that is going to be another factor in this that we'll have to see. I will say the broadband stuff for the Hughes installations. Hughes has an approach where they will do both the GEO satellites, which is what comes pre-installed from Airbus. The 350-1000s will have that. The 788 has it as well, I believe. And then their goal is to, at some point, add a second antenna onto the aircraft that can do the LEO satellites. Think Starlink. It won't be Starlink because it's the wrong system, but that idea, and whether it's OneWeb or Amazon or one of the others, Telesat is the other one, Lightspeed, are the main ones right now. One of those will come online. It could even be SpaceSail out of China. You never know. And so when you get one of those added in, then it becomes a game of balancing and mixing the traffic. And again, what is the need from the user to deliver a good experience, and what is the cost? And good network companies are very good at balancing those things. Hughes has experience doing it in every other industry, just not aviation yet, but It seems like it should adapt well to aviation once they get the hardware on board.
I can tell you, it seems very unlikely Air India will go for a Chinese system due to
Yeah, I know.
various issues. But stranger things have happened.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, we are hearing some companies talk, like a Panasonic Avionics. Again, they also sell internet service. They are talking about doing a dual system, one for China and one for the rest of the world, and having that be the system they provide. It would be Leo, not with Geo. But so there is some talk about that, because technically none of the Leo systems can operate over China today. Starlink does in some cases, but there's a lot of questions about how legal that is and what's going on. India is actually another similar challenge. All internet traffic in India has to be landed in India. It has to come to a teleport locally so it can be managed by the government. Turkey has the same thing. Russia has the same thing. There's a lot of places around the world that have that, and Starlink doesn't actually support that necessarily. So, yeah.
Staying on Air India set, their A350-1000 first class was supposed to be built on the Saffron Unity platform, but supply chain killed that plan. They have now pivoted to a customized version of the Airbus Master Suite concept with a 2030 debut. We will see on that. Two questions. Does that 2030 timeline hold any credibility in your eyes, given how often these programs slip? For example, Singapore Airlines recently pushed rollout of their new premium products to early next year. And my second question, does the supply chain forcing function actually end up delivering a better product for Air India than what was originally planned?
Better is in the eye of the beholder, or the besitter, I guess, in this case, in a lot of ways, right? What I like might not be exactly what you like. But I think one of the big challenges with aviation is timelines. And I sort of alluded to this with 2 to 3 years away for all the stuff you see. This is 3 to 4 years away before, this first class suite for the A350-1000 is going to break cover from Airbus. And it's beautiful. The renderings are gorgeous. It's amazing. We'll see just how it actually gets delivered to airlines and how much of that holds. I am a little skeptical that it's going to be, as the videos show today, on an airplane. Just even with all that space, I'm not entirely convinced that an airline wants to invest all that space just for first class. That said, anytime you can delay the installation and sort of finalizing the design a little bit and get it closer to the actual delivery of the aircraft, it's going to be better. Little things like we're seeing, you see airplanes getting installed today with USB-A power ports because that was a design decision that was made. But if you start, we talked about this actually in another panel there. If you start with, you buy 50 airplanes from Airbus, you buy 50 A330s, let's say. It's a huge order. You have to finalize the design 2 years before the first one is delivered. And all of those things are based on what was available at the time that the designing was going in, so it's probably a year older. You take 10 planes per year, and they all match. 5 years in, you get your 50th plane. It's taking technology and hardware that's 7 years old. And that's, baffling compared to automobiles where you can change the seats out every year. You can do little tweaks every year. You don't do that in airplanes. The certification is a problem, the commonality, spare parts, all of those things. It just doesn't work. And so it's really hard to stay modern and consistent and deliver a great product. It was a great product at one point, and you just got to hope that, it survives and wears well enough that people won't hate it when the last one comes out. And so in that sense, having it delayed isn't a problem. In some ways it can be good, but it also means you don't get the new plane on time, which is bad.
Before moving ahead and talking about IndiGo, this is a reminder to some of you who listen to the podcast regularly but do not subscribe to it yet. The right time is now. Don't hesitate to press that follow or subscribe button on your favorite app. All right, then, Seth, let's talk about IndiGo now. They have the world's largest single airline fleet order by number and Long term, they will continue to expand internationally, yet their product is almost entirely no frills. From a passenger experience lens, what would it take for Indigo to move up market without losing what makes it operationally formidable?
I think the question really has to be is do they want to go up market? There's good reason not to,
Well, they have
especially
350s coming in,
yeah. So
and
especially
there
at the
is.
short haul, it might not make sense. Long haul, they do have the premium economy on the 350, excuse me, on the 787s from Norse. Um, they're going to have the 350s. It will be very interesting to see what they choose to equip them with. Um, I will say, Willie Walsh, and I know a lot of these decisions and discussions happened well before he got there, but he has a history of not always being a luxury guy, let's say. He doesn't mind dipping back towards the very basic product. And, you know, good news is there's strong demand for a basic, consistent, reliable product. You talk to any LCC CEO or C-suite person, what they'll say is our passengers like us because we're cheap, or at least consistent, and they like us because we get them there on time. And that everything after that, especially 2 3 hour flights, everything after that is I can get my own meal, I can get my own whatever, I'll get my driver to take me. Talking with the former Steve Greenway, the former CEO of Flydeal in Saudi Arabia, he said we take away business from Saudia, which was their parent company, on some of their domestic routes where they both fly at the same time, and people will take his single aisle plane over a 777 with a real suite or whatever because it's an hour and a half flight. They don't care about the luxury, but they want to get there on time, and they want to and they want to actually get there. And so there's things like that you can do is after you have the reliability, then you start doing little things. You can have, part of your loyalty program that may not be published, but this person, takes this flight, they commute back and forth for work twice a week or something like that. Or every week they're on my plane, they're on the 3 o'clock flight. We always know they are. You can start to do little things around that and recognition of your premium customers. It's not always just getting a free upgrade. Maybe it's they get a blocked seat next to them unless the flight is sold out. Um, you can do a soft block, things like that. So there are ways to recognize your premium passengers. There's ways to generally deliver a product that people want. Ryanair sells how many millions of seats every year, and there's nothing premium about it, but it's a flight that goes from the place you are to the place you want to be, and generally speaking, it's reasonably priced. So, and I will say the counterpoint to that with the 350s and the long haul stuff, long haul low cost has been terrible. It's been a terrible business to be in. No one has been successful at it yet. Um, Maybe IndiGo will be. It's a big if, big maybe there. Um, I think though for them, the value proposition is going to be focusing on the stuff they know they can do well, not trying to run two different airlines at the same time and having that sort of split experience.
Yeah, but I think it has to be a hybrid operation set. I mean, I don't think they can run a all economy product on 350s, right? There has to be a premium seating product in the front. That's where they'll make most of their money.
But could it
Uh,
be premium economy only? Do you think it needs to be first class, or do you think it needs to be a bed?
I don't know
Right?
how much premium they'll be able to get with a premium economy product. I mean, again, I've been wrong many times in my life. I'll be
Me too.
Yeah. So, but it's just so hard to see that. And also, I'll tell you what, the ambition of Rahul Bhatia, the founder of Indigo,
Yeah.
he he wants a proper Indian airline, you know, and they have said multiple times that they have left the low cost station way back. Peter Elbers said that on the stage
Yeah.
8 10 months back, or maybe around IATA last year. So yeah, I think Indigo will retain its low cost model as much as they can, especially in domestic sectors. But internationally, I think they would want to be a slightly better product because
Yeah.
that's how they'll have to make money.
And it is important to remember that low cost refers to the airline's costs, not what presents to the passenger. And so a low cost airline, I mean, I would argue that in many ways, Emirates economy class is a low cost product.
Well,
Emirates economy class is
Emirates 232 business class is also a low cost product.
in Turkish, if we're
Yeah.
gonna go that way. But right, like Emirates, the value proposition for Emirates is they have such big planes and they pack economy class in, and it's not uncomfortable, but it's not luxury either for economy class. They distract you with those 2000 movies, so you don't remember that you're squeezed in. Uh, but that is on a you know an available seat kilometer cost perspective, Emirates is one of the lowest operator costs in the world because they have so many seats on every plane. And so, there is some value there you can get. Um, I would say being able to do a proper premium product on the 350s also comes down to what's the onward connection. If you're doing that from Delhi or Mumbai and then connecting onward in maybe if it's the 2-2 seat premium, that's okay. But if you're connecting onward in the back of a 28-inch pitch, 29-inch pitch, 3-3 single aisle, that's not great. And it's hard to make that premium pitch versus the Middle Eastern carriers that are going to connect you via their hub and have premium the whole way. And so
Yeah.
that gets real hard. And we've seen that in the United States. We've seen the US carriers, especially with their regional jets, trying to put more first class seats on because that person buying the $10,000 ticket to Japan or whatever with a bed doesn't want to be stuck in a crappy economy seat, even just for that 1 hour.
Yeah, and Indigo actually code shares with everybody from JAL to Virgin Atlantic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that's why now they have a slightly more a higher legroom product called Indigo Upfront.
Yeah.
So I think you get 3-4 inches of extra leg space. And there's a sandwich which comes in, and you can select your seat, so on and so forth. So yeah, I mean, they are
Yeah.
trying to make little bundles and differentiation in the product wherever they
Yeah.
can.
The, the,
So
the challenge with those little bundles, the differentiation, everything else, and this is not explicitly why Spirit Airlines failed this past weekend, but I think it was a contributing factor, is as an airline, especially in the low cost era, and I know they're transitioning out of that, but if you stay focused on just being a low cost carrier, you know exactly what you're supposed to deliver, you get that consistency, the passengers understand it. As you shift out of that, you create a risk to the business of, we're not trying to just be a low cost carrier, we're going to do these other things. So now you have to deliver it, and can you get people to pay for it because they're not used to paying you for those extra things. Even though they're getting extra things, they're not used to paying you extra, and it does become challenging. And if you lose that focus, can you hold on to your customer base and your margins? Can you hold on to your revenue base? And I think Spirit did struggle with that a little bit. Also, the US market was changing. It'll be interesting to see, especially as Air India rights itself and becomes a stable domestic operator, with that half of its operation. Does it provide real competition to Indigo at any level, and especially with onward connections that forces
hmm.
Indigo to try to change its behavior?
I mean, effectively, we are a duopoly. But in some sectors, Air India does provide real competition and actually is a leader in some routes.
Yeah,
And just also to finish the Indigo point, Indigo also introduced a loyalty program last year.
right.
Again, as a part of becoming a slightly premium
Yeah.
or preferred airline, not your typical low cost carrier. So they've done these little things, and we'll see how that moves forward. But interesting times ahead. Set, if you were advising an Indian airline on what not to copy from Western or Middle Eastern passenger experience trends, what would be at the top of that list?
It depends on the airline because it varies across all of them, but I think the sort of what not to copy can often come down to the cabin experience and interaction with the crew. And I don't want to say that all Western airlines have terrible flight attendants. That's definitely not true. But there is a type of hospitality that you can have in the in-flight experience that I think really is the make or break deal between, my flight was on time, it got where I was going, all of those things fine. But then on top of that, that's a good flight. That's an acceptable flight. I'm delayed, my flight's canceled, that means it's terrible. Um, but to go from good to great is usually comes down to little touches of experience in the cabin. And I think Western airlines do that less well than Asian carriers, and do that less well certainly than the Middle East. And so, you know, it can be challenging. I will say, like, the work conditions for Middle Eastern employees, airline employees, not great. There's some reasons why those come together the way they do, and it's not a perfect scenario. But I would say focusing on that, not copying even as a low cost carrier, the somewhat hostile engagement experience that one often gets from the cabin crew would be a big thing to not slip into. I'm trying to think. The other thing was, we can talk about like the unbundling and all those things, but honestly, at this point, I think that ship has sailed. The world has moved in that direction, and there's no reason to. I don't necessarily like it, but I understand why we're there, and it's going to stick around forever.
Yeah, I think maybe barring the Singapore Airlines and maybe Starluxes and a couple of other airlines of the world, almost every airline has now unbundled even business class fares.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, what else is left now?
It's real hard to convince yourself to pay an extra $500 to get into the lounge when you're buying that ticket, though.
Well, Karsten Spohr would disagree.
Yeah.
Uh,
I might not want to take advice on running an airline from Karsten Spohr right now. They're struggling in a lot of ways.
Well, by their own admission, Lufthansa makes the least amount of money in their group, yet they want to centralize everything with Lufthansa itself. Anyways, Seth, the Gulf super connectors, Emirates, Qatar, Etihad, have long been the benchmark for passenger experience. Are they still the gold standard, or are there newer reference points that Indian Airlines, or are there newer reference points that Indian Airlines should actually be studying?
It is always easier to do well with a small group because you can control the experience. You can know that everybody's on the same page all the time about the message that we're delivering. As you grow, that just becomes challenging. Um, I think the Middle Eastern carriers, the Gulf 3, they do a pretty good job still. I would say that the uh, the Japanese carriers have, and Singapore Airlines is one I would put up in that category. Qantas, actually, for long haul, I would put in that category. Um, the Japanese carriers, it's a struggle for me. I love the experience of flying with them. They are so focused on that passenger experience, the bit I talked about earlier, those little things to make it good. And this is a me problem. I don't speak Japanese, and I know they all speak English, but it's not always easy to understand through the accent in a loud airplane when I might have had a drink or two. Like I said, it is a me problem, but it is one I've now taken. Last November, December, I did JAL A350 first and came home with ANA business class, and it was lovely both ways. The crew really were wonderful, but there were a couple times I had like asked 3 times, "Wait, what are we doing?" I couldn't understand, and so I don't speak the language, the default language. That is a me problem, but it is a problem.
Emirates recently activated Starlink on its first A380 with a three antenna configuration touted at 2 plus Gbps of capacity to the aircraft. What are the real world passenger experience implications of that kind of bandwidth ceiling on wide bodies, and does it finally make the performance excuse irrelevant?
I think we're getting close. I've been writing about connectivity for 15 years, and for the longest time, it was eventually we're going to have enough bandwidth. Um, Now, when I talk to the connectivity providers and even to some airlines and ask them, is there enough bandwidth available on your airplanes? Um, they're no longer saying in a couple of years we'll be there. They're starting to say, yeah, we're getting there. We're there. Some of it is the LEO systems, the Starlinks of the world. Some of it is even with their Viasat just got their last two satellites for their new constellation into orbit, and they think they're going to be there when those go active later this year. They're talking about we'll have plenty of bandwidth also. Um, and so higher latency, but they say it's not a problem, and they've done some studies, and we'll see if that actually proves true. But I think we probably don't need 2 gigabits to an airplane. Um, for one thing, most of the streaming isn't HD. Like, you don't need to do HD streaming on your phone when you're watching a movie. A lot of phones will scale that down anyway. So, but you start to get in the point of you want to not have contention between the different devices. And I think we are getting very quickly to a place where you do need a lot of bandwidth. Maybe not 2 gigabits, but it's also the reason they have the 3 terminals on board is to make sure that they can, it's not true load balancing, but they can do some sort of load balancing of the network. They can have a scenario where if one fails, the other two pick up the slack. They can keep things running. Also, because of just the way the Starlink constellation is built, those satellites are probably going to talk to, or excuse me, those antennas are probably going to each talk to a different satellite, which increases the availability and flexibility and reliability of the system. So it does matter. I don't think getting a gigabit per second per terminal is the be all end all. But Amazon's new LEO constellation, their antenna that they also introduced last month, they're talking about 1.2 gigabit download speeds in ideal conditions. And Fincom had a new terminal. They're talking about getting into gigabit level speeds. So there's clearly a push from airlines are asking for, we want to make sure, this thing that we install that's going to be on this plane for 7 to 10 years, we want to make sure it's going to support speeds that we'll need in a decade also, not just today. And that goes back to the, how do you build a system today that you're going to install in 2 years that's going to be viable for 7? It's really hard. And so I think that's a bit of where the gigabit stuff is starting to come from.
Seth, you flagged after AIX that at least 3 companies were pitching
Yeah.
new in-flight internet business models, right? Where service providers take all the risk, and airlines don't take that risk.
Yeah.
You said you were skeptical because
Yes.
we've been here before, and so tell me, what would actually need to change in terms of costs, in terms of revenue models for this to work this time?
Yeah. We have been here before. A number of companies lost a lot of money trying to subsidize the hardware costs. And, the original GoGo model was they would provide the hardware and pay the airline 10% of the revenue or whatever it was and keep the rest of it and hopefully eventually make up the difference. And even that very lightweight hardware system, people weren't willing to pay enough to use it. Now we're even getting away from a system people pay for in a lot of cases. Passengers are starting to expect that internet not only will be available and fast, but also free for some level of service at least. And the goal these days is more about integration with a loyalty program or some other advertising platform where advertisers are subsidizing the cost. Serving up, I watch a video for 30 seconds and then I get 30 minutes of internet kind of thing. And maybe it's good enough that I liked it, but now to get the rest of my flight, I have to pay. Maybe you get to watch another video. Maybe you're just done. And I am not convinced that the ad revenue side of things can generate enough money. And the vendors will tell me that if we know who the passenger is and we know where they're going and all the personalization bits about it, we can target them perfectly. Our conversion rates will be much higher, and so advertisers will pay much more for that. Even still, the number that you've got to hit to make it work to cover the costs of providing internet for everybody, to me, seems to be extraordinarily high. And I know advertising works. There's a reason there's a whole industry built around it, but the advertising that we've seen targeting aviation and airline passengers has not done that personalization well yet. Um, I'm still not convinced that there's a plan to do it well this year or next year. Maybe 2, 3 years from now, they'll have it figured out. And I keep going back and joking about, what it'll be in a couple years. But that to me is the challenge. And so what do they need to fix? It's the revenue side of things, getting that revenue sorted from an advertising model that will actually generate enough revenue to cover these costs. And right, I mean, an in-flight internet system can cost 500,000 to $1 million US dollars to install on an airplane. They're not cheap. And then you still got to pay for the satellite every month and to fly it around. So, um, these things are not cheap. And so how do you make that up with, 50 cents a dollar here or there? If you do enough of them, it adds up. But how much revenue can you make through those advertisements?
How much revenue can you make from those advertisements? I think Burana's rising age system might have an answer. I know you've been talking about it. So what it plans to do is essentially convert, I think, this a seat back into a digital billboard. Uh,
Yeah.
so tell me, where do you draw the line between airlines monetizing the screen and creating an ad-driven cabin environment that is degrading the entire passenger experience set?
Yeah. It it is a very fine line, and it will always depend on the airline and what their goals are. I mean, we see today there are advertisements in the cabin. There are stickers usually, or placards, but you get this month's special snack deal. You get book your vacation now. Here's a QR code. You get, destination, whatever. Sometimes it's on the outside of the overhead bins. Sometimes it's on the underside of the door. Sometimes it's on the seat back. Um, there are definitely airlines doing all of those things. And you could say it's day class A. You could say it's not good, but most of the time, it doesn't really affect me. I think American Airlines tried stickers on the tray table once. So you opened it up and you looked down and there was a sticker there. Um, right? Like, none of that's good to me, but it's also not bad necessarily. I think the Rise Engage system for Burana basically is putting an e-ink, like a Kindle e-reader or whatever, but a color screen in the seat back. Very low power, um, not really animated. You can, takes a half second to update the screen, so you're not doing, anything animated on that. But you can put an ad on it, and that ad could alternate between, buy this product or a snapshot of a moving map or a welcome to seat, 3B or whatever it is. And so there is some good use there, but to me, the real hard part of it is it changes. And so a sticker, it's there, it's done, whatever. If I'm staring at my phone or whatever and this is behind it, when it changes, it's going to grab my attention, whether I want it to or not. Your eye naturally is going to get drawn to a changing visual thing because something moved. And that's where it gets to be a distraction more than just an advertisement. And I think that's probably a step too far for what I'm comfortable with on an airplane. Um, I imagine that I'm going to lose this battle, and some airlines are going to install this sort of thing anyways. But Um, that's where to me it becomes a problem is when it's like flat, not quite flashing, but changing during the flight.
With the A321 XLR now hitting its stride in 2026, we are seeing what's being billed as wide body style comfort in narrow body frames. We've all seen what Etihad is doing on its XLRs, and it's quite innovative. It's interesting. It's not exactly first class upfront, but the soft product is quite nice. What are you seeing from seat manufacturers set in solving narrow body, premium economy, and business class puzzle? And is there still tension between densification and the passenger experience?
Absolutely, that's always going to be the challenge between those two things. Um, I don't think that they're having the sort of premium product on a narrow body plane is such a bad thing. I have flown, and this is just partly because of my experience, but I used to live near New York City, near Newark, and I flew Continental 757-200s across the Atlantic 20 or 30 times. 7-ish hours in the plane. Okay. I mean, it wasn't a wide body. Um, it got me where I was going. It got me there without a connection, which is really nice. And so I think that there is certainly reason to want the larger plane and feel the like bigger overhead space and all of those things. But at the end of the day, the convenience of getting where I'm going matters to me a bit more than but I had to fly on an A321 XLR instead of a A350. Um, Now, when you start getting into the premium product, there is the challenge of how much space is available for that premium product. And I think the business class, the lie flat beds that we're seeing in single aisle planes today are a bit more cramped than the twin aisle models. It's just there isn't quite as much space to play with, and the airlines are, always optimizing every inch, every centimeter of space. And so there's not quite as much space to play with for the premium, but I'm getting on a 7-hour flight, 8-hour flight, whatever it is. I'm going from Boston to London. I'm going from India, maybe it's from Delhi to or Mumbai over to Paris. You start to hit the edge of that range, where a single aisle makes sense. But if you can get a nonstop from a smaller city in India, maybe it's from Ahmedabad or Bangalore, Bengaluru. Did I get it wrong this time? But anyways, I'm close. But if you get the nonstop from there to Europe instead of having to go via Delhi or Mumbai, that that convenience factor, maybe you're willing to compromise on having a smaller plane. And so to me, I do think that um, you put a quality internet system on board, you put a quality entertainment system on board. Uh, the seat space is about the same. The lavatory is going to be smaller. You can't get around that because of just the shape of the fuselage. But I think most of what the passenger is going to experience is the same, even if looking at the plane, it doesn't feel that way. And at the end of the day, the time savings of getting where you're actually going, if you can get it on a nonstop, becomes real significant. And, Etihad, is it a first class suite on the front of those XLRs? I mean, it's pretty close. They invested, they put the space in for it. The first class on the 380 is nicer. There's no doubt, but it's not a bad product to be, quote unquote, stuck in that first class seat on the 321.
What's your opinion on Collins Aerospace's Skynook? It won the Crystal Cabin Award in passenger comfort, using the fuselage taper at the last row of economy on wide bodies to create a private space, if you can say that. Do you think it's meaningful do you think it's meaningful for passengers, or just clever monetization of otherwise wasted space? It actually reminded me of Etihad's brilliant way of using the front corner of the A380 as the bedroom for the residents.
I like it. I think Skynook was one of the big winners at the show this year. Among other things, it is a product that is going to be flying later this year. They said they have a confirmed customer. And what Skynook
Do you know
is
who?
they did not share who. They said they did not share. I think they said 787, but they did not share who. Um, so we'll see. It is basically at the back of a wide body aircraft that is 333 layout. The fuselage narrows, and so instead of 333, you get 232, something like that. Um, uh, what they've done is that little gap between the two seat and the wall typically was just dead space, and some people, some airlines actually market it as a premium section of the cabin. I think Air France charges extra for it to book the last row. But other airlines, it's just two seats and they're all in the back, and so people don't like it. And so what this does is it adds a flexible sort of armrest piece that can slide out and create a table. It can create a bassinet area for a baby. You can just use it as a sort of desk and storage. They talk about putting a service animal there. There's a lot of different ways it can be used. The airline that is going to use it, they're talking about is a family space, so expect it to sort of be a bassinet mount. Um, but it's an interesting use of space, but I think this is one of those things. It will be good for the passengers having that available there. Um, they are going to charge for it. There's no doubt in my mind that the airline is going to want to make their $100 or whatever it is for having access to this better space. And so, good news, bad news. I think at a minimum, this is something we're not charging you, $10 to sit in a middle seat that's closer to the front of the plane just because it's closer to the front of the plane. This is something where it's real value add, but you're almost certainly going to end up paying for it. And I would say for the airlines, at least make it worth my time to pay for it.
Seth, is there any room left for innovation business class suites? Or do you think we have hit a ceiling where every airline is just iterating on the same sliding door concept?
I think there are still differences between the seats. And it may be a difference between whether you and I like the same thing and the same sort of positioning when we sleep or relaxing or whatever, that some deliver better than the others. But there is some differences. I think, not everyone's installing doors today, even still in business class. And so they take up space, they add weight, they're complex for maintenance. And if I think Air Canada A321XLR, which was introduced in Huttenberg, they're not putting doors on that seat. They said if you're sitting in it and you look out, all you see is the other wall across the aisle. You don't need it for privacy. You don't need it for the noise removal. And they were able to keep the bed an inch longer. And maybe that's an issue with narrow body versus wide body, like we just talked about. But, not everybody's doing it. Even some wide bodies aren't necessarily doing it right now. And that's okay. There is a reason and a means to sort of compete that way between the airlines. And so that's fine. That gets the job done there. And, at the end of the day, I don't know that we're going to see a massive change in what it is. Can we go double decker? Probably not. Everybody's been trying to do that for a while now, and I think evacuation reasons alone make it a non-starter. It would be cool, but I don't think it's going to happen. But there are some things that people are constantly thinking about, constantly trying to tweak. I think it becomes trying to make it a more immersive experience, sort of spreading the entertainment in more into the seat experience. Rave Aerosystems showed off a seat that they marketed with Safran, which was their former owner. Safran did the seat part and they did the entertainment part. And this was a first class suite, not a business class, but it was a full wraparound screen. The entire sidewall of the first class suite was a video screen. And they could put animation on it. If you're watching the video, the movie on the screen in front of you at the far end, as you start to recline your seat, and if you lie down on your side, they can put it up on the sidewall so you can still watch it. If you sleep on your back, there's actually a little bit of screen that goes over your face that they could put it up there so you could just stare straight up instead of having to, hurt your neck trying to keep watching your movie. So like there are things that they're doing, but we are starting to hit some limits in terms of what is the physical space in the cabin. I will say the other thing to consider though is like the Finnair business class seat that no longer has mechanics in it, right? The ANA's new version is similar, no mechanical parts. We are going to see more airlines trying to make that work because it's so much lighter and cheaper. And if people are willing to sleep, if sleep's really what matters, it works pretty well.
Whatever you saw at the show set, what do
Yeah.
you think is the future of the economy seat looking like?
I-
And
you know,
I'm sorry, I just want to
yeah.
add what Emirates keeps saying and Tim Clark keeps saying. He's been talking about innovating for the economy product for a couple of years now, right? He made a comment. I think the last he made a comment about 2-3 months back as well, on something in the works. How much do you believe him? And yeah, again, and also, what do you think is the future of the economy product?
I mean, I certainly believe him. He has earned that, I think, over the years. Now, what the it is remains to be seen, but they're always innovating and they're always trying to come up with new products for economy class. Um, think a lot of what we're seeing right now is changes to the uh, weight of the seats, trying to strip more weight out to make it lighter to fly, save fuel, save emissions, all those things. That's not a bad thing. It's not always the most comfortable thing, but it's not a bad thing. Um, and then, you know, similar to business class, is there a huge, step change still to be had? I don't think so. We're not going to get into like standing seats or anything like that. We're not going to go to off the charts crazy like that. But I do think that there will be some changes or continued iterations on, trying to keep things lighter and more and still find comfort in them. Integrating the entertainment system more tightly, trying to, make all of those things work a little better for passengers to try to keep comfortable over a 10, 12-hour flight. It's not easy.
If airlines and airports truly design the end to end journey together, what are the two or three most obvious friction points you'd remove first?
Security.
Uh,
And I'm never going to win that one. No,
yeah.
there are places that do it better than others. But you're right, it's never enough checkpoints open, never enough
So what
screeners
you're
available.
trying to say is Changi's way of doing security at the gate itself is better than doing security in one big area for all
No,
passengers combined?
I don't agree with that.
No?
No, because I want to know that once I'm in the terminal, I don't have to worry about what's the line going to be at the next place. I want to get rid of all my lines as quickly as I can through the travel process and then just be able to walk to my gate and get on. When it's from at Changi and I have to go and clear security at the gate, do I have to leave the lounge 15 minutes earlier? Or do I have to leave 30 minutes earlier? Um, right? I deal with this in Copenhagen. If you fly out of there, the main lounge that SAS runs is in the Schengen area. But if I'm flying long haul and have to go to non-Schengen, how long is the security line or the immigration line going to be? And these days, especially, I don't know, with the new system in Europe. So it's, I don't, I don't like having extra lines in the terminal after I get inside. I understand that that might not be the most efficient because you can staff better if you know there's going to be 200 people. We can do it. But I think that, security is always going to be a challenge and it's one that we're never going to fix. So beyond that, I think that the airlines and the airports can do a better job generally of just coordinating on the availability of information, right? That one of the big challenges with air travel is you are submitting yourself to the gods of air world and letting them control your life now for the next however many hours. Um, Someone else controls when you eat, someone else controls maybe if you get a chance to sleep, all of those things. And to me, having more information about the experience helps reduce the stress of that not knowing. And so you get, you know, do I have a gate assigned yet? Well, the airline knows hours before what gate you're most likely to be at, but they may not tell you, they may not tell the airport until 45 minutes before you need to be there because they want you to be shopping. Things like that. That can be hard. And so I think coordinating that better would make a big, big difference for the passenger experience, passenger comfort. Um, but there's also the airline and the airport in many cases are competing with each other. They're not the same company. They're sort of fighting with each other for who gets control of you, control of the information you're willing to share, control of your spending, all of those things. And that makes it really hard to convince everybody that, a happy customer is going to spend more with everyone, but you've got to convince all the parties to believe that.
Looking out, let's say 4 years down the line, 5 years down the line, what's the most realistic and meaningful change you think is coming for passenger experience? I mean, top of my head, I can think of high speed internet.
Yeah.
What else? Do you see anything
Well, you
else?
took my answer. That's not fair. No, I do think that the connected experience is going to change a lot of things. And it's not just that you'll be able to take your phone or your laptop out and have, the whole world at your fingertips, the same as you do on the ground. Um, it's going to change the way airlines operate. It's going to change the way information gets onto your seat back screen. We're already starting to see it a little bit with some of the entertainment systems. The Emirates A350s have the new Thales entertainment system, and one of the things it has is a bit where, you might be watching live TV of a football match, and the match ends. In the background, there's a service that's creating highlight reels and interviews and all of those other things. The mix of live TV, long form, short form video content, maybe a podcast, maybe news writings or sports writing about the match, all of that can get bundled together, uploaded in real time as the match ends, and now you've got a sort of post-match thing. You can go watch a replay of the highlights, you can watch
Highlights
the
reel.
interviews, all of those things. Being able to chunk that together is a mix of superior processing on the ground, systems that can pull it all together, and then that connected aircraft that lets them affordably push it into the cabin with literally a data center. It's like a rack in a server room, but they put it in the aircraft instead. A few, 100 terabytes, 200 terabytes of disk space. So there's plenty of space for all this stuff to be stored. And you end up with a great experience. It's still coming together. It's not perfect, but a lot of the pieces are starting to show up. And I think by the end of the decade, that is going to be a very common. We're still rolling out hardware from a decade ago too, but this new stuff is going to be a very common part of the travel experience, especially at the airlines that are willing to invest in it. Um, so I think that part of the connected travel experience in some ways is more interesting than here's internet, go use it. Anyway, I'm going to do both, right? I'm a multi-screen person. I imagine you are too. I've got my phone, I've got the screen on the seat. I'm going to do both things, but being able to do both and having that integration is going to be a big part of the experience.
And exactly on that point, said I mean, what you just explained, I think it's nice. It's a good to have,
Yeah.
but personally, what I feel maybe airlines and seatback, IFE companies can do better is making my phone talk to my seatback screen,
Yeah.
which is a much more complex. I mean, I've seen some, basic things on
Yeah.
Singapore Airlines aircraft on 350s, and I think on their 7, 8, 10s, where there is some sort of communication between the seat and the IFE. But I just feel there can be so much more that the phone can talk to the IFE
Yeah.
about my preferences,
And
about things
so
that I like, and so on and so forth. But
right, we've seen things. Singapore Airlines had the Panasonic control built in, I think a decade ago now. This is not new, but it's been very hard to make valuable to the airline and to the passenger. And it used to be just browse the list of all the movies, and rather than scrolling on the screen over and over again, you do it on your phone, you tap your favorites, you pick play, and it shows up on the screen in the seat. Um, it was a start. You could do it before you got on board. So you could review the movies that were going to be available while you're sitting in the lounge or while you're on the
on the
train to the
Singapore
airport.
Airlines app as well.
Yeah. So the app does that, and that's great. Um, and that's the first step. But you're right, getting beyond that to the integration of this is what we, you know, that it learns who you are and lets you do things. Um, I think is going to be a big win. And part of it is a privacy concerns. But if you're controlling it and it's all on your phone, that some of that actually goes away because it's not the airline holding your data, or at least not in the plane. So I think some of that will come along. I will say one of the other things I saw that was very cool, an accessibility thing. There were a couple different airlines that had sort of quote unquote AI talk to your seat and make it recline. All right, you push a button, it beeps at you. Yeah, I know you're making faces at me here. You push a button like, and so why do I care about that? It sounds like just a bunch of people only in business class, not in economy, but still a bunch of people like yelling at their seats, recline, recline, right? Like no one wants that. But for a passenger who's visually impaired, and has trouble with, or motor impaired and has trouble pushing the buttons and seeing things, and especially now on seats where the buttons aren't real buttons, being able to use your own phone, or one of the guys, this is actually funny, was demoing the product to us, and it popped up on his watch. And he's like, wait, we have a watch app too? And the partner who had made it was like, yeah, it's on your watch too. So this was on the third day of the show. The guy had been selling it all week and hadn't even noticed that they had a watch app, right? So if you are someone who's especially visually or motor impaired and you know your systems, you don't have to learn a new system. Imagine I sit down, my phone pairs to my seat, and I can, with the super zoomed in low contrast or high contrast, whatever, I can say, put my seat into bed mode now and not have to fumble around and figure out where that button is on the seat. There is some real potential there.
And on that full of potential note, I have to thank you, Seth, for being a wonderful guest. So much to learn from you. What a fabulous chat. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. We'll look forward. I'll have to come back again. This has been great. We should do it more often.
A conversation that reminded me that every centimeter of cabin space, every connectivity decision, every IFE screen is a design choice someone made, and someone like Seth is watching. Thank you, Seth, for your time and for the work you do keeping the industry honest on passenger experience. Find him at PaxEx.Aero and on Dots, Lines and Destinations. This coming Sunday is the 26th episode of the Indian AvGeek. Babita Barua, the CEO of VML India, will be with us. Feel free to follow me on social. You will find me everywhere, including Blue Sky, as at Vishal Mehra. Always happy to have your feedback. Seth is active on Blue Sky as well. With that, keep your tray tables up, your seatbelts fastened. I wish you well, and happy flying, my friends.